Hello everyone and welcome to episode number 8 of my podcast called Game Art Talk. Lukas Stratmann is my guest this time. I'm very happy to have my first German guest on the podcast, but no worry guys, we'll stick to the English. So hey Lukas, great we could figure out something this time.
Yeah, hi there. Thanks for having me. And no German. We'll stick to English. Don't worry.
It would be a mess, I guess, for the podcast. So just a common thing on my podcast is give us a short introduction of yourself. What are you currently doing? Where are you working? What is your stuff? What is going on in your life at the moment?
I think at the moment I'm stuck inside like the rest of us. But I am a level artist at Ubisoft Annecy, and I was just working on the Division 2 Warlords of New York. If you've seen that, came out recently. That's a very short introduction of who I am. I've been in and around the games industry for, I always say, sort of the better half of a decade. Did a bunch of QA in the beginning, and then environment art for quite some time. And also, I'm quite big on management and the focus on management. I went to university for a 3D design and management degree, which I'm very, very interested in the sort of people management side.
Mm-hmm. So you're planning out going on project lead or lead artist positions, or is this something which interests you, I guess?
Yes, I would love to be overall creative director.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Sort of having the bigger picture in guiding the team towards an amazing product. I always say, partly jokingly, my art isn't good enough to be the greatest artist. That's why I would like to be leading those better than me. Obviously, that's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek humor there, but I'm very interested in the sort of making games, and I'm very interested in seeing it all come together and helping it come together and pushing that team as far as they can go, as far as we can go.
Would you say that being a lead artist, or let's say a creative director, that you need to have the experience in a specific field, like you have to be a prop artist for like 6 years or something? Would you say that you can become a creative director without these?
Well, obviously, so right now I'm a level artist, and personally I plan to be in level art for a number of years before I consider moving into higher positions, or before anyone would consider me moving. Generally, I did say this on Twitter the other day, I don't think you need to be, junior, mid, senior for 20 years to become a lead. I think a lot of times you'll find that a lead or any manager is a very different job from actually doing the groundwork, from actually doing the line work, as I always say. So I don't think you necessarily need to have that, but it is extremely valuable to have the knowledge of what those jobs are, and not just your own, you're a props artist, you're a level artist, not just those, but if you are able to be in a studio and you can gather how animation works and how that pipeline works and what they have to watch out for, and you can gather how tools programming works and how game programming works, if you know how a game is made in every single facet, I think that is what helps you the most. Certainly what I'm aiming for. Probably a better question for an actual creative director who's already in that position. But from my point of view right now, as being at the bottom of that ladder, I would say, yes, I want to climb the ladder, but I also want to be able to have as much knowledge about the entire process as possible.
So you can do your job the best when being in the position, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it even helps you like right now in the here and now. If I know what programming can do, I can do better level art, I can ask a tools programmer to make something for me, and I know they can make it for me, and I know that they, don't have to spend millions of hours to do it, or I can give feedback on a tool, or, coming from QA back in 2012 to 2014, 15, QA for me was always I tried to not just find the problem, but also figure out the steps to reproduce it, or figure out the logic and make it as easy as possible for the coder to find the actual problem in code. So how I approach that side of it. And
you started you started in Q&A, right?
I did start, It kind of, on the developing side I did. So I used to run a games review website. That's how I got into playing lots of video games. So writing reviews, doing the PR work with the publishers to get review copies. Very interested in becoming a writer for a large magazine. So first I was writing for a couple small websites, and I started my own. And I kind of, out of that, got a contact with Tripwire Interactive, with, at that point, the Rising Storm development team didn't have a name yet. And I kind of stuck around with them, started to do QA, gameplay testing, and I realized that I enjoyed making games more than just playing and reviewing them, and did QA and gameplay testing for, part-time for Antimatter Games. We also did a documentary where I was being an actor basically within the game, recording it in Game Engine. So out of that grew that I really got into making games and into, I always said, I want to be a producer because I don't actually have any skill. That's how I used to say it. Terribly sorry if any producer is listening. That is, I don't mean to say that producers don't have skill, but in terms of on the actual development side, I can't model, I can't program, I'll have to be in production because I'm good at organizing. That was always my thought. And then I got into 3D modeling, and I got into environment art, and now I'm here. So that sort of just happened that way.
You're small starting out, right? So
I started out by just working, and I think that's always something that I liked doing. Is I don't just sit there and go, oh, I'd love to be that one day. No, I jumped around from wanting to do reviews to realizing I liked creating, to realizing, environment art was an option. Someone was teaching me, multiple people were teaching me, and then grabbing any opportunity that came along. As the moment someone offers me a different position that sounds interesting to me, I might take it. It might not be art related.
Mm-hmm. I gotcha. So you started out as an environment artist, right?
In terms of art, yes.
In terms of art, yeah. So you switched to a level artist. Can you say there is a switch, or is it just another name?
So I think in general, people always like to talk about 3D software and standards, and I don't think there's any standards in this industry. It's a different thing for sure. Level art is more focused on the actual level and less on building props. But it comes down to your studio. So when I say environment artist, because it's what I was mostly doing, but in my job as an environment artist, I was doing a lot of props, which other people would consider prop art. So in the end of the day, I think there is an overlap, there is nuances there. It comes down to your studio. Level art is a bit less focused on making props, or not at all making props, but it's only focused on what I enjoy most, which is actually building the game world and making sure players can have a good experience in it, and it's visually guided and it's visually interesting.
Yeah, I would say that level artists maybe has a more of a, just like the bigger picture in mind. Could you say that? Not like environment, like the level.
I think it comes down to studio. Because for us, I always say level art, environment art is so similar that the nuances there will come down to your specific studio implementation. I know that some studios call level artists level integration. I have heard that before, certainly a couple of years ago. So there's no real you're this rank in that position, and we all do the same if we have that same name.
Okay, so you have been kind of active on YouTube lately, right?
With
the Dynasty Empire, you started out with a small channel, and it grew bigger and bigger, where you just explain Blender stuff, right?
Yeah, so for quite some time, actually, I was interested in doing Blender tutorials. So again, my background in games reviews, that I didn't write anything, I just did videos. So I've always had the affinity to have a video content-based solution. And that was a weird way of saying that. A video content-based solution. And I was, again, I'd been using Blender. I first started out in 2007. I was using it for environment art, for prop art since sort of 2008 I want to say 12, well, really 14 is when I started really fully. But I've been using it for a while. I always say a decade. And been interested in doing videos. And so Jeremy Dynasty, we were talking his big, or our big community, which is Dynasty Empire. And I was like, I'd be interested in doing videos. He was interested in maybe gathering more creators on the actual channel and within the community to have a wider range of content. And initially I did it on my own channel as a partner. And then we decided that it is probably better to have everything on one channel. Also, podcast Alex Bellas is doing, Game Dev Discussion, that came on board as the official podcast, also on the channel now. And so that, to me, is really exciting because I get to share that knowledge, or we get to intershare that knowledge on a wider range. And that's really what it's about. It's about not me teaching someone Blender. It's about sharing knowledge and getting knowledge back. People in the comments been really active. So it's been really exciting.
So tell me something about the Dynasty Empire. It's I think it's pretty popular nowadays in the game development community, especially on the art side. So just tell me something about it. How did it start out? When did you jump with on the train? And
so how it started out, I wasn't around for it starting out, actually. So okay. Dynasty, he's an environment artist at Ubisoft Massive, and I think it actually started out as like he was streaming, or he is streaming still, but he was streaming a while back, and they started out having this community, and I joined in 2 years ago now, so that would be 2018 in summer. In summer 2018, one of the members on there was writing a blog post on ArtStation saying, "Hey, this is a cool community. You should join it." And I did, and then I kind of just stuck around. And it's becoming a place where now a lot of people are joining, and I do encourage everyone to join. It's a really great place. The idea is that we're all learning together. It's really that sort of the big community of people. There is anywhere from a student to art directors and anything environment art related, but even other art related topics in there. And we have different channels, something like critiques, for example, people helping each other, critiquing each other's work, or just having discussions about workflows in art discussion. So that really is that it's a big community to learn together. And that really is as well what the stream is that Dynasty is doing, or what my videos are, or even what Alex is doing with his podcast, where we're learning and we're all developing each other. And, I have something cool to share, which is, Blender. Or you have something cool to say in art discussion. Maybe you have a question, maybe you have an idea, and that interconnection is really what it's all about.
Nice. It's pretty good. I will put the link to the Dynasty Discord channel right into the info box. So you have been a Blender guy since 2007, right? Did you touch any other software, like on the modeling side?
Well, I actually, as a matter of fact, I have later on, certainly, not in the beginning. So I always say, I love Blender, but the software doesn't matter. Your art matters and your pipeline matters. Mm-hmm. And, within production, you might be using 3ds Max, and then you go home and sure, you can continue to use 3ds Max, or you can use Blender. So I've been very fortunate that at my last job, I was working remotely. I was working from home, and I kind of had that protection, so I could just use Blender, and it didn't really matter. And even though the studio was using 3ds Max, I got away with using Blender. And my boss, who had hired me, we knew each other, but he sort of just let it slide because he's like, okay, sure, whatever. I can't do anything about it. So I was very fortunate to use Blender when it wasn't very popular still. And obviously with 2.8 now, this has changed where everyone has taken another look, and it's become quite popular, and it's making its way into even AAA spaces. I always used to say and used to think that I will have to switch one day. Throughout university, we were using Cinema 4D. So at one point, I was using Blender at home for work. I was getting into 3ds Max because I knew I had to for, eventually joining any AAA studio. Yeah. And I was using Cinema 4D for university projects. And so that I've been using whole range of software, but I always see myself come back to Blender. That's what I'm most comfortable with. That's where I see the most potential in the future for a software that is super lightweight, that is kind of complicated to learn, but once you do, it's quite versatile in terms of polymodeling, all the way to semi-procedural to entirely procedural. You have a whole range of things in there. It never crashes. It sort of never gets in your way. I just like it, so I do see myself come back to it whenever I can.
Yeah, I think it's a cool thing that it will turn out to one of the most anticipated softwares in this direction. And also AAA studios are getting, also I think Ubisoft is more and more on Blender, right?
So within the development fund of Blender, Ubisoft is supporting the development fund, as well as some other sort of small little things. We did announce that the animation studio in Paris is switching from a custom solution to Blender, I believe. So that is sort of the the non-game development side, which is animation studio is more film, I guess, film and TV. But it is certainly, if you look at who is sponsoring and who's on the development fund, you can see there is a couple of larger studios, a couple of animation studios, software, hardware developers like Intel and Nvidia and AMD. So I think it is certainly on the verge of becoming not a standard, absolutely not, but it's becoming another solution people can use. And as more as we open our pipelines up in future, and we will open our, I'm not talking about Ubisoft, but I'm talking about AAA overall, we will all open up our pipelines. It's just simply become more comfortable, I would say, where we see people use Modo, we see people use 3ds Max, we see people use Maya, we see people use Blender. And I do think that comes with challenges, but it allows artists to use the software they're most comfortable with. And if we're open-minded enough as an artist, we can switch softwares, and I think that's where the future is heading.
Yeah, I think the same way. As you said, the programs don't really matter. It's just your pipeline and how the quality of your stuff goes.
Yeah, so it comes down to how you're set up as a studio. So my old job before joining Ubisoft, we were using Unreal Engine 3, and it doesn't really matter what kind of FPX you plug in, right? As long as the FPX is the correct settings, it doesn't matter if it's coming from Max, Maya, Modo, or Blender. Simply, there's no difference. And we didn't, other than that, the only pipeline we had were sort of our own ways how to do things. It was a pipeline, but not as in a sense of a AAA studio with tools programmers. On the other hand, you have legendary studios like Naughty Dog who use Maya as their level editor, basically. I don't see them changing to an open solution where everyone can use what they want to, because their pipeline dictates what software they're in, and they're probably heavily integrated with tools and everything. So there's no harm or shame in not being able to open your pipeline. But I think there is a consideration in a lot of studios that are having the sort of more Unreal Engine solution, where it's like, well, it doesn't matter where we're coming from as long as all the source files are available. And the cool thing with Blender is that it is entirely free, so anyone can just get it to look at the source files. And there is no baggage attached, and so in terms of data being transferred to any in this case, in the other case, Autodesk, for example. Like Blender, you just get Blender, you can go in the jungle and you can still use Blender. And I think that is something to be said about that, where you can lower your footprint in spending, you can lower your footprint in dependency on other companies. Yeah. So I think it's an interesting future with the idea of using more open software solutions. Especially Pixar has been pushing it since their inception, with now USD coming out, but all the other things as well that Pixar has developed and just put out for free to make other people better. So I think this ties back into the Dynasty Empire in a way, where if all the artists in the world, they share their knowledge and they share what they know, someone else can take those ideas and develop something new that is built on top of those pillars and of those stones. And that just means we all get better. So it's a benefit to everyone.
Yeah. So as you being a guy having a bachelor degree in 3D design and management, and also on the other side, you are creating free YouTube tutorials, would you say that the bachelor degree did benefit in your development as an artist?
No.
Okay, that's a short, indefinite answer.
Well, I can, and I absolutely want to. If you want to, I can go into the details of that, because I would say I'm quite a special case. I went into university while I was working in environment art, and I didn't actually go for the art. I went for the management. I went into that course because I knew I could probably wing the 3D side, and I did, because it was like, here's beginner 3D modeling, and I was like, well, I'm making stuff at work at the same time. What I'm interested in is the management side, and in that specific case, focused on not games, but on media management, basically. Lots of numbers as well, project management, people management, change management, all of those keywords. Very interesting stuff for me, certainly. I went into university, and I said to myself, I am buying myself 3 years of time, where I can have an extremely small footprint. I moved back in with my parents. I said, I'm not going to spend any money. I'm going to take all the money I earn. I'm going to put it, into my university, into my schooling, or, maybe save it if I can. And, I didn't do anything other than work in university. I went to one student party, which was a great party, but it was the only one. I packed all the parties into one party, and then I blacked out for 2 days. It was great. Don't do that, kids. Don't do that. So what I did is I said I gave myself 3 years of time to become good enough to join AAA. That was the goal. And so the university didn't really help me to be a better artist on face value, but because I had the goal to be a better artist at the end of it, it turned out that the time that it gave me made me a better artist. It wasn't the institution, but it was the setup of me going in saying I want to become a better artist. And certainly joining Dynasty Empire halfway through that helped a lot as well, because I would say you probably learn more from those communities than you would do from a teacher, or from, we did a lot of advertising and architectural visualization stuff. That isn't going to really help me in game art. Yeah. But that time allows me to get a lot better. And, working in environment art at the same time, that pushes me to a point where my degree is specifically so that I could learn more about management. And I have a degree, so it makes it easier to migrate to the place I want to go, which is Canada. So there's 3 things really what come down to why I went to university. I didn't have to go to university. In the first semester, my 3D teacher said to me, just get a job. And I was like, yeah, that's not the point.
Yeah. So would you say that the self-taught thing is coming more and more important in the future? Like, especially with those communities like Discord and Dynasty?
Interesting question. I think that self-taught. I don't think there is a divide between self-taught and university taught, because I think the people who leave university and immediately get a job are self-taught as well as university taught. Mm-hmm. If you go to any institution, doesn't have to be a university, any school that teaches you 3D, 3 years is not enough to, 3 years of teaching, which is maybe 2 hours a day, is not enough to make you a good artist. I mean, if it is, kudos to you. But I think what you will see is that 95%, this is a random number, but 95% of those really, really good artists coming out of university probably do it 18 hours a day, except maybe on one day where they go partying.
Yeah,
but
really grind out.
Yeah, I think, we always say 10,000 hours until you're good at something. Although there's a caveat there, because if you spend 10,000 hours doing it wrong, you get really good at doing it wrong, which is quite interesting. But that aside, is 10,000 hours of learning, 10,000 hours of getting better will make you good at something.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think self-learning, I'm not sure if it'll become more important, but I think is extremely important, because you can supplement the teacher in school with all of that community, with a mentorship, with asking people in the industry what the current standard is. I think having a very clear understanding of where you want to end up after your university schooling, or after your schooling rather, that's helpful, because you can aim at something. If you go to university or to any kind of school and you just want to figure yourself out, that's also great. You spend money to, after 3 years, realize you didn't want to do it. If you have that money to spend, great. But I do think that self-learning, not self-learning, but, mentorships, YouTube videos, books, all you can get. And there's such a wealth of information nowadays with, especially YouTube. I mean, not even tooting my own horn, but all of those things. I mean, I have an idea, I type it into Google, there's 17 answers, and I make a video about the idea. It's not like I sit there and I come up with new things. I take other people's ideas that are out there and I repurpose them and I make them, I don't make them better, but I make, further develop them and how to use them in environment art. So, it's that interconnection of sharing, which I in university I was kind of missing, because it's very much a teacher-student relationship there, and it's not there are 17 million voices. The problem is, though, with learning it by yourself, if you start out, and I had this problem when I was starting out as well, which is why in 2007 I never got into 3D modeling, even though I got into Blender, is I didn't know what to look for. So yes, sure, there was internet, pretty slow internet, but I could have gone into forums in 2007 and figured out how to 3D model, but it was really hard to do because the wealth of information wasn't there. Now it is there, but now the problem is what information is actually good. What tutorial actually teaches me the correct answer. So I see a lot of people, for example, this is a random example, in Unreal Engine 4 you can make material attributes. And you can break material attributes, and you can set material attributes in your material graph. And a lot of people in tutorials will use make and break. And make and break is more expensive on the tech side than setting and getting. Nobody teaches you that. It's not technically important for environment art, but if you get used to it and you never question it because someone else said it on a video, and you make a game with it, suddenly you wonder why your game is like 5% less performant than it could have been. Mm-hmm. And so, to me, that's always been the danger of any kind of learning content. But that's the same with teachers in a university, is never listen to your teachers, always question them. Although that's, again, it's being very poignant as a statement.
But
obviously listen
statement.
To people.
Yeah. So when you're making tutorials, how do you start out? Do you get the idea, or as you said, just gather some information on how you could help people? Like with your new cloth tutorial, where you make, your cloth simulator with sewing and pressure in Blender. How do you make it?
Yeah, so there's sort of 2 or 3 guiding principles. First of all, I am level art, environment art focused. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to make videos that will teach you Blender, but at large, they will also teach you about environment art and how to produce environment art. So you don't necessarily have to do this in Blender. For example, the splintered wood tutorial, people came up to me afterwards and said, I can also do that in Max. And I said, yeah, that's awesome. It's not a Blender tutorial as such. It is a tutorial of how to do that in Blender. But if you watch it and you do it in a different software, that's the same principle, same outcome. Awesome. So that's the guiding principle is this useful for an environment artist in games? The second one is I want to teach Blender is always a weird word. I want to show Blender to you in case you're interested. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then how do I actually come up with topics? It comes down to maybe there's a new feature. I just want to show a new feature, which sort of end of last year I was doing quite a lot, where it became nearly a news show, which I didn't really like. So there's a danger there. But I have a full list now on sitting next to me of things I want to do to make your life easier. So, some people, especially this cloth one, would be people thinking I have to do that in Marvelous Designer. But no, now in 2.82, you can absolutely do 95% of what you could do in Marvelous in Blender. So here's a video showing it. It'll help you in your environment art if you need it. And people already actually posted pictures of them using the technique. And so that's really what it's about. It's trying to show techniques and trying to evolve everyone in environment art. And also, I'm extremely selfish. So I'm doing this to learn myself, which is great. Because sometimes it's like, I have a new one coming up. Depending on when this comes out, it's already out as a video. If not, I'll tease it. is procedural trash bags. I don't like sculpting. I don't like sculpting. I'm very lazy, actually, as a person. And so I want to find a way how to make trash bags. Like, just regular small sort of 5 liter or whatever trash bags, or 20 liters. I don't know how large they are. But it's like, how do I do this? So I looked around the internet, sort of like, is there a procedural way of doing it? If someone has already come up with an amazing way, I'll just post the link and whatever. But then it's like, okay, nobody's really done like a procedural thing. So I found a video from, I forget his name now, one of the lead artists at Crytek.
Matthias? Is it Matthias Wagner?
Shame on me. No, he was on Alex's podcast, I believe. Something with an M. I'll forget. Anyway. Lead artist at Crytek. Apologies if you're listening. I forgot your name. But he was doing a tutorial quite a couple years back about Marvelous Designer-based trash bags. Doing cloth simulation, basically. It's like, okay, interesting. I'll try to do that. And sort of looked at Marvelous and, okay, I can do this in Blender as well. Looked at a couple other people. Found a couple other solutions I didn't really like, but I liked certain elements of. And, yesterday night I was sitting down and I actually got a really good result, and even was able to take what the artist at Crytek had done and maybe change it slightly to where I thought it looked better. Like the way he had done it was more of a sack than the way of trash bags I have. Sort of the knot at the end didn't look quite right to me at the bottom, so I changed that, and now I got something that I quite like, so I can make a video now. So I learned how to make trash bags because I hadn't made any before, and a lot of people will tell you have to sculpt them to make them look really good, and I don't think so. So now I can take that and I can make trash bags, and the same with the splintered wood, and the same with the padding, and sort of I like to learn as well. So I learn at my own videos. I come up with new techniques, new workflows, or maybe not new ones, but improved ones or new ones for me. So that's sort of the third wheel on that.
So you're trying stuff out. If it works, then you're gonna show other people in your tutorial how your new technique just applied on your topic.
Yes, absolutely. So because I think that if you're just showing your own old workflow, first of all, you run out of ideas, and also you fall behind, because I'm very interested. I think this ties back to my management training and my interest in management even prior to the training. Is I'm interested not in today. I'm not interested in tomorrow. I'm interested in next week. Because if you break management down, there's sort of 3-4 different levels of it, which usually is like 3. It's tactical, operational, strategic. If you start a new business, people will ask you to do a 3 or 5 year plan of where you want to be. Yeah. But then there's also a 3-month plan, and there's also a what are we doing this week plan. And I'm not really interested in showing you how I did something 5 years ago, unless maybe I've not seen it anywhere and it seems to be a new thing that only I ever did. But I'm interested in how can we use this software in future? How can we make this better that we already have? And how can in a week, is this still applicable in a week when it's in a different software? That's what really interests me, because if I'm just showing you an old workflow, it isn't really going to push your horizon.
Yeah. That would be my next question. How do you get better? How do you get better in this time of 3D art, where you have so many possibilities to look at tutorials and to interact with the community, to get feedback? There is, like, I think it's a bit too much nowadays. You have to be more minimalistic when it comes to developing yourself.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thought.
You can kind of be blasted away by all this feedback you can get, because everybody has another opinion how to do art, and it's pretty hard to find kind of a roadmap, or maybe there is no roadmap. So how do you think about this topic, especially?
It's extremely subjective.
Yeah.
Right. There's no one way of doing it. Because there isn't an answer to that. There isn't a direct answer to it.
No.
Getting better, you have to define for yourself. What does that mean to you? To me, getting better means knowing more, period. Which has the downside of, I said this the other day, and people usually agree when I say this, I have more knowledge than I have skill.
Oh,
It's a weird admission, but yeah.
I think I'm on the same train because in my position, that's the same case. I'm more in a management position at the moment, not like down to the groundwork at the moment. But
yeah. Well, it's sort of like, I was thinking about this just a couple of days ago, and I thought to myself is, I like figuring things out. Mm-hmm. I don't then actually, like if I figure out how to do something, I don't sit down and do it for 100 hours because I've already figured out how to do it. The rest is boring to me. So that's my personal, right? That's my personal stuff. Is I like figuring problems out and I like figuring the future out. Well, at least as far as I can. It's a bit presumptuous to think you could figure out the future, but I like to be prepared for what might come in the future. Might come, especially. So I think first of all, figure out who you are as a person for yourself. Yeah. You just have to be comfortable with it for yourself. Like I'm comfortable knowing I'm not good at certain things, or I'm comfortable knowing that I'm not interested in certain things. And then once you've done that, you can look at the wealth of information. And if you say you're starting out, you're a student, and you want to do an environment, focus on one thing. Break it down to, okay, this scene I want to get good at composition. Okay, well, if you only want to get good at composition, then maybe model a couple of blockouts or get mega scans. Make a scene only with mega scans. If you're only interested in composition, you don't need to model everything. You don't need to prop art. You don't need to material art, all the other things. But on the other hand, if you want to do an entire scene with everything that encompasses everything, you have to know the parts first. So if you're starting out, well, maybe make a prop first. Maybe understand how Substance Painter works. Because learning Substance Painter is learning a software. What you actually want to learn is how do materials behave. It doesn't matter if you do it in Photoshop or in Substance Painter, because, Photoshop is way harder to do in terms of time, but it's the same principles. Is, where does rust appear on a certain object? A car, for example, usually has lots more rust underneath it than on it, because that's where it gets wet, or that's where the corrosion happens, right? You want to understand how a material breaks down, how it degrades. You want to understand all of those things, which at this point you've already understood a lot of things about making base materials, but also about texturing. So that together in 2, 3, 4, 5 years of time will enable you to make a really, really, really good scene. And I don't want to sound like I know what I'm doing, because I absolutely need to get better at colors and composition and lighting. My prop art could be better in texturing. I could be better in hard surface modeling, absolutely. I absolutely suck at sculpting. Anything organic, I need to get way better at. Like, I know all of the points I want to get better at, which is not an admission of, being weak. It's an admission of being strong, really, knowing where to get better and how to grow and how to use that to grow into the position you want to be. So if you're starting out, if you're a student, or if you're still in high school maybe, and you want to get into the industry, well, focus on points and get better at them. And then decide for yourself if you want to become an expert. So I have this is more of a philosophy question than it is related to any realism. But generally spoken, in human history, if you're an expert in a job and you can do one thing, that means once we figure out how to automate that thing, you are redundant. Yeah. So if you become a material artist who can only make materials with Substance Designer, and you are the best material artist ever, right now I want to hire you and pay you lots of money. In about 5 to 10 years, we might have found a way to automate that, to do it procedurally with AI. And then all of a sudden you have no skills that are applicable. However, if you understand everything about materials, and you could also sculpt them in ZBrush, you could also author them with an AI, you can also do it with photo scanning, you understand how you break up tiling, you understand maybe even shaders a bit, all of a sudden you've grown and you've touched upon lots of different things. You're probably not as good at the actual main job anymore because you spend more time doing other things, but you're more versatile. I can use you in a way better way in more different scenarios. Sometimes on my team, I want a specialist. Sometimes I want someone who's broader. So I think how do I learn? There's such a wealth of things. Focus on one thing, but don't forget about the others, because the others might become important in future. And then the more you grow into it, you'll realize, okay, LODs, for example. Like if you are specialized in making LODs, you're on the way out right now, because like automation for LODs is a normal thing, has become a normal thing. So be aware of where, try to figure out where the future is heading. And you'll do that once you actually understood more. So, in 3, 4, 5 years, if you're starting out today, you'll understand that, or you'll get better at understanding it. And then it's sort of a gamble. In the end of the day, it's always a gamble.
So you would say a good mixture in the team between really specialists and talented, or not just talented, like specialists who know their craft in and out, and like other people who are more open-minded when I look into other fields. I think a good mixture is always good for success, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would fully agree. It goes back to theories of management. Again, I always talk about theories because I've mostly done it in university. I did do it in other jobs as well, where I was manager or coordinator. But in theory, on paper, you want a team of different people and different personalities. And if you look into that, there is generally spoken, certainly how I learned it and how I kept on and keep on reading about it. There is those people who will sit in the corner and just work and do the one thing and be amazing at it. They're specialists. Absolutely. We need them for a special task, for a specialist task. But then there's also the ones that are busy bees and they go around and talk to everyone and they make the team feel good. We have people, you have people who are better at organizing. You have people who are better at foresight and foreseeing problems. You have 4, 5, 6 different, or 8, sometimes 13 different archetypes of people, of different behaviors, that you want to be able to create a team that fits together. Because if you have too many different people together, or too many of the same as well, your team isn't going to perform as well. I always bring this example of, on paper, there might be a person in your team who isn't making you any money, who is not pulling his weight, so to say.
Yeah.
But what we haven't realized is that person is actually doing so much for your team that your team gets better for them. And if you get rid of them, it destroys your team. And now we're talking about change management. It's a change in team, a change in environment, a change in who is in the team will change the performance of your team, because you're breaking it apart. And, we're both German. We probably both follow soccer or football. Yeah. You can see that sort of, sorry for anyone who isn't interested in sports, but the German national football team.
Yeah, they have good specialists.
Yeah, well, no, but like if you look at how dominant they were when they won in Brazil, and how just horrible they were the next time around, just bad. Like, oh my God, like how did that happen? Kind of bad. Is they had a lot of people leave the team after they won in 2014, and you can just see that they were not replaced with the correct people, and that new team was just not good. It wasn't a good team. It was still good individuals. They were amazing players. All of them are amazing players. They're on the national team. But the team dynamic changed so much and was not replaced with the correct people that the team lost for the first time in, the group phase of a World Cup, which, that in 70 years. So that's a very good example of why your team needs to have not just the best, but the right people.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good way to end the conversation about management. And I think every listener knows how good managing people or a team, in my opinion. So I will put your YouTube channel, or is it a channel you have, or is it like is it just a playlist on the Dynasty? I'm not that sure.
Yeah, if you put the Dynasty Empire YouTube channel in the description, people can see my content and people can see everyone else's content. I do encourage you to check out the other content as well. We have other Blender stuff. It's not just mine. Dynasty is doing his streams as well. Alex is doing the podcast, some videos. We just have Michael who joined for as well Blender and other stuff. So there's really cool things in future as well to come. So if you check out that channel, you're at the base, and if you join the Discord, you get everything.
Yeah, and also can really recommend the GDD, the Game Dev Discussion by Alex. It's pretty good, and it's always a good listen.
So, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lukas, for having you on my podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, absolutely, it's a pleasure.
And yeah, feel free to check him out, and we'll hear you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.